Madam Clerk, please read the next item on today's calendar.
Committee substitute for House Bill Number 151, Finance, amended by the House Finance Committee, entitled An Act Relating to Unemployment Benefits and Providing for an Effective Date. The bill is in third reading.
Representative Spohnholz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. HB 151 before us essentially does two things. It waives the standard one-week waiting period for Alaskans who receive unemployment. This would leverage about $2.4 million in funds from the federal government because this is entirely paid for through American Rescue Plan funds. The second thing it does is it increases the per-dependent benefit from $24 to $75 this year. The statutory per-dependent benefit was set in the 1980s of $24, and if it were adjusted for inflation, it'd be about $83 today. This is really critical for Alaskans with children, and I think this is more important than ever given the decisions, the governor's decision to end the federal pandemic unemployment compensation in June. At that point in time, the average Alaskan household's income, if they were on unemployment, would go from 35% of their wages prior to unemployment to about 20%, which is very low. We can agree. We're hearing anecdotally that we're already seeing applications for jobs, which is really great after the governor's decisions last week. And although our economy is turning the corner, we're not quite there yet. And so our unemployment claims are still about 124% of what they were last year at this time. Only about 1/3 of people on unemployment have dependents, so this isn't for everybody on unemployment. This is just for those people that have children, spouses, or folks in their families with disabilities. I also want to be really clear, unemployment is not a public assistance program, it's an insurance benefit. Alaska is one of only 3 states where employees already have skin in the game in our unemployment insurance program, so each one of us as Alaskan workers pays into that program through payroll deduction. This increase for the per dependent benefit is just temporary. It's just this year. And I think it's important that we have some context about those that are filing for unemployment. There are about 4,500 construction workers that are on unemployment right now. There are 3,600 fewer jobs in the oil and gas sector this year right now as there were last year at the same time. There are about 750 education workers on unemployment, and there's about 1,500 fewer jobs in that sector right now. We've been hearing a lot about leisure and hospitality. There's a lot of folks on from that sector that have been on unemployment, about 5,000 of them. There's actually about 7,200 fewer jobs. So we're hoping that the change, that the governor's change will get more people back to work, which I think is a good thing, but we also want to make sure that Alaskans who have children have what they need and are able to take advantage of the unemployment insurance benefit that we have all been paying into. As I said, it's an insurance benefit, just an insurance program, just like health insurance or auto insurance. And for those that need it, the time is now. So I urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further debate? Representative Kirka.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in strong opposition to this bill. My wife and I have the privilege with our business of supporting and serving many other very small businesses in Alaska. And this past year, we have constantly, over and over again, been hearing from not only our clients, but other individuals in the business community with small businesses that the added unemployment insurance benefits are killing their businesses because they can't hire employees. People don't want to come to work, and I mean, I've even heard that you've got people asking to come in and just work for tips. It's kind of a constant. I'm hearing it from almost every business owner. In fact, in your packets on this bill, I was going to ask to read it, but I won't because I see that it's been passed out already. This letter from Bright Beginnings, Madam Speaker, they have businesses in my district, and they can't hire folks because it's worth more to stay home. It's for some individuals. I understand for higher income earners that's not the case, but we've done a lot of damage to our economy, to our businesses, to jobs this last year, and the sooner we get away from that, the better. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Wool.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I support this legislation. I'll admit that while hearing this bill, the topic of conversation of a disincentive to go back to work came up in finance. And as a longtime small business owner, I've been aware of this situation for a long time. Before COVID, it's been an issue, and depending on what kind of employees you're looking at. But COVID came and a lot of people lost their jobs. And I understand some small businesses can't find people to work. And I think that's a separate issue than what we're looking at right now. And I think most people want to go back to work. And I think there are some people that maybe would rather stay home. And when the federal subsidy was $600 a week, and then it went down to $300, now it's going to be zero. The federal subsidy is zero. So the maximum you can take home, I think, is $250 a week or something like that. We're the lowest reimbursed state in the country. So unemployment is nothing you can take to the bank. If you're an oil worker making $100,000 or $90,000 a year and you've lost your job, as the bill sponsor mentioned, you're out a lot of money. And if your job isn't coming back, you're going to have to find a job and look for one. And hopefully you can find one that's on par with the one you lost. Is that individual going to go work at a daycare center? Probably not. Not if they're a North Slope oil worker making good money. They're going to try to find a job comparable to what they had. Their unemployment insurance come nowhere close to keeping them in their mortgage and car payments and so on. So what this bill does, it allows an extra $50 per dependent until the end of the year. And $50 per child is not very much. If you have a couple of kids, especially teenagers, they eat. And $50 does not go very far. So we're the lowest reimbursed state in the country. This adds an extra $50. And that $50, that's not going to the bank. People that had a good job and lost it and are on unemployment, $50 is not like, oh my gosh, I'm rolling in cash right now. No, they need that money. And this just extends it to the end of the year. And I understand the shortage of workers right now for certain industries, and that's an issue that should be tackled. It's nationwide. It's not just in Alaska. Hopefully we'll have more seasonal jobs coming along and people can get that seasonal work. But I think for those people looking for work, and are there bad actors? Sure, there's a few bad actors out there, but most of the actors are good actors and they need help, and I don't want to deprive them, have a single parent not being able to feed their kids. So I support this bill. I support the extra for the dependents. The other thing it does is it eliminates the 1 week waiting period. And during COVID, if you were exposed to COVID, you had to mandatorily sit out of work if you were exposed to someone, and you couldn't work and couldn't get paid. And this will also help you regain that lost week or two of pay, so you don't miss out on it. So that's another good feature of this bill. But I support the bill, and I hope others do too.
Thank you. Representative McCabe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, I appreciate the words from my colleague from District 5. It's not just some business, it's virtually every business. You can't drive down a street in Anchorage without seeing banners on stores that say help wanted. On construction firms, I have several friends that own construction firms. They're all looking for work. Speaking to this bill, the governor just did away with the $300 federal aid, and for a family of four with a nuclear family, so a wife and 4 kids, we just added back in $250 for till the end of the year. It is not just our economy is not recovering as we heard previously. Our economy is in desperate straits, and we need to recover. And to do that, we need people to take these jobs, get to work, and build our economy, put money back into our economy. I just can't imagine that we would pretty much undo what the governor just did with this bill. I totally applaud the fact that we need to change it. Maybe we need to change it in another bill going forward and bring it up to 75. But right now, we have to get people back to work. We have to incentivize them somehow to go back to work, and this bill doesn't do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further debate? Representative Fields.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do rise in support of this bill. Also want to share some information we discussed in Labor and Commerce. I think there's some confusion. This bill is totally separate from the $300 per week pandemic unemployment assistance, or PUA. That is what the governor canceled. This bill does not restore it. This bill comes nowhere close to meeting that amount of money. It was that higher level of aid that existed when Bright Beginnings wrote in asking the House Finance Committee not to further increase assistance. So this bill is just totally separate in terms of what it does. And I just want to reiterate, what does this bill do? Number one, it accepts federal funding to waive the 1 week waiting week. There's no reason that we should not accept this federal funding and have it circulating in our local economy for Alaskans who are unemployed. Number two, this bill accepts federal funding for the dependent benefit, the additional $50 per child through September, and then from September to December leverages our state unemployment insurance trust fund to pay that per dependent benefit at a $75 level through the end of this year, following the amendment from my colleague from District 5. And on that, there was discussion last time, how does this affect the fiscal note of the bill? Is this sustainable? In Labor and Commerce, we specifically discussed the mechanics of having a per dependent benefit at $75 rather than $24 for the months of September, October, November, December. And the Department of Labor actuaries told us that that is affordable and it will not deplete the state's unemployment insurance trust fund. I think it's important to remember this trust fund is always being replenished at the same time that it is providing insurance for people who are unemployed. So there's always money coming in and money coming out. And what the modeling showed is having a per dependent benefit at $75 that is funded out of that state fund, again, only from September through December, does not deplete the fund, and that fund will remain healthy. So, since there's been discussion on the floor of this issue of will the bill before us disincentivize people from working, I want to provide some real numbers to show that no, it won't. For an individual who is making $20,500 annual income, which is a full-time minimum wage worker in Alaska, that individual will receive $202 per week, which is a 50% wage replacement. I think that comes out to $1,000 a month. As you're aware, Madam Speaker, that won't cover rent in most Alaska communities, much less food. So if the bill before you passed, let's say there was a worker who had one child. A worker with one child following passage of this bill would receive $277 per week. Now, I know in my community of Anchorage, there are apartments that you can find for $1,000, $1,100 a month. So if 151 passed and we have a single parent with one child, that parent will be able to make rent and, be living on beans for the month. $277 per week, I don't know anyone who would accept that instead of going back to work and supporting themselves. I mean, it's literally barely enough to afford rent and food, but it is enough to put food on the table for kids. A friend of mine who works in tourism told me that a local company, Trail Mix, here in Juneau, recently posted 16 jobs starting at $16 per hour. They got 200 applicants. People are starving to go back to work for a living wage. Now, the worker shortage issue is real, and I think it's important for us to recognize that it does go beyond wages. If you're earning $12 an hour, if you're a child care worker, that's not enough money to pay for child care for your own kid. So for workers at the lower end of the pay scale, there's this real trap. They can't afford child care. It's a no-win. But that's not the fault of the unemployment insurance system. So in conclusion, Madam Speaker, this bill has nothing to do with the $300 pandemic unemployment assistance about which we have heard some anecdotal criticism. It doesn't deal with that. All this bill does is increase the per dependent benefit, children, putting food on the table for children. And it accepts federal funding for that waiting week. And again, we heard the modeling in Labor and Commerce. This bill is sound in terms of the finances of our unemployment insurance trust fund, and I do urge a yes vote, because I just think about kids in my community where I've heard from the principals and teachers at school that we are seeing more hungry kids in Anchorage. This bill can make sure that those kids have something to eat. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Eastman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We are at times guilty in this body, I think, of focusing on the forest and missing the trees. But in this instance, I think we're making the opposite mistake. And we're capturing the trees pretty well, but I think we're missing the forest. And the context, which is so very apparent to me, is that we have been facing a massacre, not only in this state, but certainly here in Alaska. And that massacre has been a massacre of small businesses. And it has been painful to watch as small businesses for whom families, in many cases, have invested all of their capital, all of their resource, decades of their lives, those small businesses have been taken from them. And it's sad for me to say that they have been taken from them in some cases because of policies that we have been responsible for passing. And it is certainly true that over the last many months, more than a year, we have had situations where it has been more financially beneficial in the short term for some in our state not to work than to work. We are talking right now about the specific dollar amount that the unemployment benefits would generate towards someone who is receiving that money. But we're not putting it in the context of all of the other forms of assistance that we are offering as a state, some through the federal government, some just us as a state. We're missing out on that bigger picture. And so you see headlines where individuals making $30,000 a year are in several cases actually receiving more not to work than to work. And that throws our unemployment benefits program entirely on its head because, as I understood it, part of that program was to give people the opportunity, once they've been knocked down, once they've lost a job, to get back on their feet and to have the opportunity to find work and to become employed again. And yet we're not seeing that happen in this case because the incentives have been inverted. And I don't fault any individuals who find themselves in that situation or trying to just figure out how to pay the bills, figure out what's the greater decision for them. Maybe in their case it is not to work. I would caution them and others that if they're planning on waiting until these benefits end and then hoping to get their job again, that job may not be there anymore because there are small businesses that have folded and there are others who are still clinging and hanging on and hoping that once we can get past this pandemic, they'll be able to make up all of the deficit that's lost, at least enough to stay financially solvent. But many of those businesses won't be there. And as I look at this bill in the context of some of the fundamental transformation that we're seeing to our economy, both in our state and other states, this seems to me a boon for corporate America. You have seen headlines recently where Amazon is doing really, really good. In fact, their CEO, their company, has made enough money to give each of their employees a $100,000 bonus. That's a lot of money. And you are seeing that market share shift to these bigger companies at the expense of our small businesses. And so you're not likely to see a lot of opposition from some of the big players because long term, it's to their benefit that we continue to make life hard on our small businesses. And we can be doing so for laudable reasons, helping individuals, but let's make no mistake, the real benefit long term is going to big business.
Brief it easy. Will the House please come back to order? Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move and ask unanimous consent that Representative Cronk be excused from the call of the House.
Hearing no objection, the member in question has been excused from the call of the House. So we are Representative McCarty on House Bill 151.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. So you hear the discussion here. First thing I'm thinking of is premise. And what are we trying to do is to get money back into, livelihood back into the people of Alaska. And because of COVID, that it's affected jobs, affected people, their livelihood of employment, of getting money. And so we've had a system in place to augment that need there. But now COVID is coming to an end, and there's a lot of jobs that are opening up. There's a workforce that's desired, that's really required. There are people that are and have been denying work, even though some will say that's illegal, which it is, and yet it's not clearly there. I know that personally, and I know that from friends who have business have told me that, and it's not just a few. And as I look at the, I'm going to use a word, the trans-theoretical model of change, Confucius just had his own phrase for change, but what is motivating an individual to change? And as I see this bill here in good merit, if we were still in a situation of COVID, that it's necessary. But we are now moving to another part of change of life, getting back into what is a new norm. And I believe that we need to move in that direction rather than keeping that which has been the past. I see businesses that are small businesses. I see businesses that are very large businesses that are not able to employ people. So it's not just a small business sector. GCI, oil companies, I have people that I know that they cannot operate effectively because they don't have employees. So I think we need to move on as a state and get back to that premise of getting money back into the hands of people. And also another premise is that of purpose. And when there's lack of purpose, people flounder and perish. And I think as a mental health expert that we need to get back to people being employed and having purpose in life. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further debate? Representative Hanlon.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I represent a number of communities. My communities of Haines, Skagway, and Gustavus do not have jobs waiting for employees. They have people waiting to feed their family, desperate to pay their rent. And the quickest way to put money into their local economy is to make sure that they have on a weekly basis the ability to pay their rent, buy their groceries, feed their children. And I want you to vote thinking that these families are needs tested, they want to work, there isn't a job, and that money will go directly into the local economy. They're not shipping groceries from Amazon to Gustavus or Skagway. They're buying into the grocery store, they're spending that money locally today, and their families need the support. I urge you to vote the green button.
Representative Tarr.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this legislation. And you know, there's a certain irony to debating a piddly $75 a week benefit while we sit here collecting $300 a day in per diem. I bet a lot of Alaskans would like something that generous. There's a certain irony to comments about small businesses when we received over $1 billion from the federal government last year, and the reason that we didn't come back into special session is people in this body wanted to protect their own public health. So we could have done a better job to support small businesses, but we had the privilege of protecting our health. And there's a certain irony in this discussion, Madam Speaker, that 67% of Alaskans have an underlying health condition that makes them more vulnerable and more at risk for catching COVID-19 and having serious illness. And I sit here and I listen to this and I just wonder how many people in this body would be applying for a job that paid $15 or $16.50 an hour? Because people around here complain about a $50,000 salary while also collecting $300 a day in per diem. I passed out something last week when we started talking about this bill that shows the difference between a living wage in Alaska and the current minimum wage. The current minimum wage is $10.34, living wage is $15.27. Low-wage workers are struggling every single day to have their most basic needs met. And for the individuals that will benefit from this, we're talking about dependents. We're talking about their children. And there have been a series of votes recently, and I'm just left believing that for some reason, some folks think it's okay to punish children for the circumstances of the adults in their lives. These children are innocent. They have no ability. They are in the families they're in. They need to have basic support. This bill is a very, very modest amount, and it's directed towards dependents, towards supporting children. And if we had child care, I was the recipient of a letter from some constituents this weekend that talked about the dramatic need for childcare, and in fact, a bunch of moms wrote a piece for the Anchorage Daily News talking about that. So we haven't addressed the issue of childcare. So of course, there's a lot of people who still can't go to work, and because of the 67% of Alaskans who have an underlying condition, I think it's fair of us to respect their own health needs, and we shouldn't ask them to put themselves in harm's way while we're going through a pandemic. So let's just remind ourselves all of this is because there's been a global pandemic. Hundreds of people have died in Alaska. Thousands of people have gotten sick. Across the country, more than 500,000 people have died. That's why we find ourselves in this circumstance today, and I would hope that we would vote to support children.
Thank you. Briefly. Representative Nelson. Representative Tuck.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this amendment. The unemployment insurance benefits for Alaskans compared to all other 50 or 49 states and Puerto Rico and Guam is pathetic. We're dead last as far as wage replacement. You know, the Great Depression wouldn't have been so great had we had unemployment benefits. It wouldn't have been so disastrous. It wouldn't have been so scary. And that's the reason why we have unemployment benefits today, is to sustain the economy, to keep us going down to a downward spiral. And as I pointed out earlier, people who are on unemployment, they need to buy food. And buying food keeps the grocery store clerk working. It keeps the stocker working. It keeps the transportation infrastructure going. It keeps the farmer going. And it does the necessary things, one of the basics, to make sure that our economy continues through very difficult times. This pandemic has shut down factories because we couldn't have big groups of people coming in and working in the same place, which has led to a shortage of materials. And I was just talking to a friend of mine just this last week who's thinking about shutting down his contracting business just so he can go out commercial fishing, because it's not that he can't find the workers, he can't find the materials. The materials is just simply not there. That's the reason why materials are going up so high. And I can speak firsthand in the electrical industry how a lot of our members with the IBEW have left the state of Alaska because our economy's was already downward spiraling before the pandemic hit, and went and traveled down the lower 48 to go do work, and they're not going to return because their unemployment benefits for whenever they have a lag between construction jobs takes care of them way better than Alaska takes care of them. And we talked about this before, how seasonal Alaska is. We're looking at going from now into December. And we extended it from September to December because of the seasonality that we have here in Alaska. And I would argue that there's no other state that's more seasonal than the state of Alaska is. But we to allow them to go to one phase to the next phase, to keep workers here and to keep families going. This last year, door knocking, I met a single dad whose son was showing up to work with him in his truck. And I might have spoken to other people about this. I haven't even spoken on this on the floor. Where this poor gentleman, a single dad, full custody of his son, has his kid on the job site with him. He's an equipment operator, and people were asking him, well, how come your son's not in school? Well, there was no school. No classroom. And he was going to school, but he had to monitor his 9-year-old son from the cab of his pickup truck to make sure he was getting his work done. Well, what about all the other families out there that not only are their children don't have classrooms, but they don't have child care because child care facilities were also shut down. And so families were faced with unusual circumstances this last year. And we just got to make sure that we're able to sustain them. So as things pick back up, we keep the workforce here in Alaska, and we're able to get people back to work. But we haven't seen an increase in unemployment insurance benefits here in Alaska since the 1980s, and there's no cost of inflation proofing in our statutes, and so there's just no way that people can sustain on those incomes. So I think that people are wanting to stay at home because insurance benefits are so great. I don't know. I think there's other circumstances out there, making sure their children get a solid education, making sure that their children aren't left unattended, that's requiring them to stay at home, and the workplace itself. So I support this. I think this is a small little bridge that we can do great effects on helping families and keeping our economy going. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Josephson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I am a history major, and I spend a lot of time reading and thinking about history, and political history in particular. And I'm really taken by the comments from my colleague from District 16 reminding us that these weekly rates for child dependence date to 1981. So in 1981, I was 17. I was at West High School. That March, Ronald Reagan was shot. Some of you may not have been alive. You probably have read about that. Brezhnev was the premier of the Soviet Union. We were still mired for another decade in the Cold War. There was still a West Germany, Madam Speaker. Some of you may remember West Germany. Germany was split.
Point of order.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Are we ever going to speak to the bill itself?
I will.
Yes. Representative Josephson.
The point is that I'm concerned that we've gotten to this place that former Commissioner Cashin feared, that America, and he used Alaska, and he used a different term, has become a bad place to work. Fortunately, not for everybody.
Representative Josephson, we're speaking about the unemployment benefits in Alaska.
And okay. I am, Madam Speaker. This key figure has not been updated for 40 years, Madam Speaker. That's all this does, and it's a temporary measure. The former Commissioner Dragas notes in an op-ed that the governor's action removed $150 million from our economy just between June and September. If you're looking for a sweet spot and you approve the governor's action, then you're going to go beyond that sweet spot into a negative impact on the economy by voting against the bill. And as our majority leader noted, we're already the worst in the country at reimbursement of a spendable weekly wage and unemployment. That's the context we're working within. And so I ask members to think about that and urge their support.
Thank you. Representative Schrage.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. COVID's over. Let's all get back to normal. I think it's a sentiment that many of us can appreciate. It's something that we want. We want COVID to be over. We want to just get back to normal. And I think the opposition to this bill, I think, is an expression of that. But I'm not so sure that that's the case. I think for us here in the Capitol, many of us are vaccinated. We're able to take our masks off. We're able to get back to somewhat of a sense of normal, even though we don't have, the public in the building quite yet. That's something I hope we can do in the near future. But, we are somewhat to a normal place here in the Capitol. And the same is true of in Juneau and in Anchorage. Things are starting to feel a little bit more normal. Restaurants are more full. People are getting vaccinated. It's getting more normal. It's feeling better. And so I understand the sentiment that we should, dispatch with these unemployment benefits. But as I think has been mentioned, COVID isn't quite over for everyone everywhere. I know the member from Ketchikan, his community is really dealing with the impacts of COVID still. There are not jobs that are available for everyone there, and even if the jobs are available, not everyone is in a point of health in their personal life that they can go back and take that risk and take those jobs. I think of those communities where vaccinations aren't quite getting to where they need to be, and the risk that employees would have to put themselves in to go back to work and under those conditions. And I think of the terrible impact on students and their education this past year, and the families that maybe want to spend this summer helping their students to catch back up and fill in some of those holes, and maybe aren't in a position to go back to work and leave their child at home, to enjoy summer but fall behind in school. I think of the fact that not all jobs have come back equally. I actually had a constituent email me just this last weekend when the governor dispatched with the additional federal benefits for those that are currently unemployed. And the jobs that he qualifies for that allow him to meet his mortgage payments are not back yet. And he's terrified that he's going to have to move out of the state. He can't find rental units to where he could sell his house and be able to afford on a rental. The price of housing in Anchorage is quite terrible. It's an issue that we've had in a while. So all that is to say, COVID is not over, and we are not to a place of normal everywhere in this state yet. And these meager benefits, they're not much. The representative from East Anchorage talked about not everyone has the salaries that we have, which I know many of us argue are not well enough or high enough, but there are families that really need this benefit still, and I urge members to vote yes on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further debate? Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First, I'd like to say that I think we're confusing or combining a couple of issues here. I know there's been a long time goal of many to increase the unemployment insurance payments in this state. And the bill before us is talking about unemployment benefits for COVID-19. And we are using a pandemic response to justify the argument that we need to increase unemployment benefits for the long term. Those are two separate conversations that need to have their place, but they don't need to be confounded on this bill and the conversation with this bill. Set aside what the long-term unemployment insurance policy needs to be for the state. That's a different discussion. What we're talking about now is, as it says on the board right there, unemployment benefits for COVID-19. That's what we're discussing right now. American Rescue Plan was adopted and passed out of our federal government. And in July, the IRS is going to be sending low-income families payments for child tax credits. We're talking $250 to $300 a month for child tax credits to low-income families. Unemployment benefits are for people who are unemployed, not underemployed. Although I think that there is some small categories that underemployed people can take unemployment benefits as well. But Madam Speaker, we had a budget that recently passed out of this, and it speaks directly to why we would be doing this today. We had an opportunity to spend ARP money, our own state's ARP money, on private sector jobs, private sector investment for COVID response. And instead, we put a very small fraction of that money towards that. We wouldn't need to be increasing unemployment benefits right now for COVID-19 if we had have taken the federal dollars that were given to us for COVID-19 relief and put those towards private sector relief. But instead, we put a lot more of that money towards government programs. And so we're faced with what I'm hearing here today is false choices and emotional appeals for why we need to continue increasing unemployment benefits when unemployment benefits aren't the solution to the COVID job loss. More jobs are. Unemployment is. So we should be talking about lowering taxes so that it's easier for businesses to do business. Maybe tax incentives for hiring people to get them back to work. Those are things that we should be using our resources on to get people back to work. We have to trust that people want to work. We need to not take the easy road that says government can solve problems and needs to just hand out money to people. That steals a man or a woman's pride more than anything else in this world can do. A good job, providing for their family, that brings pride into a family. What are we doing to create the conditions where that can happen? Are we talking about lowering the cost of energy so that businesses can do more business? Are we talking about lowering the cost of transportation?
Representative Carpenter, I'm going to ask
it's
you
germane to
your comments to the unemployment benefit.
It's germane to unemployment benefits because we have options. We're being presented with false choices and emotional appeals that this is the only option for taking care of people who are unemployed.
Continue.
I will. That was a pregnant pause.
Brief at ease. Please come back to order. Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think one of the big things that this kind of masks in this conversation, and I'm talking specifically about unemployment benefits, is increasing unemployment benefits at this time is masking, it's subsidizing decisions at governments of lower levels who continue to make it difficult for businesses to do business because of COVID-19. We have a responsibility to lead this state out of the COVID-19 crisis. And right now, that is creating economic growth. We do not create economic growth with unemployment insurance benefits. Local municipalities who are relying on us to get unemployment benefits to their people.
Point of order.
Annual section 101 clearly says that debate must be defined to the question before the body. We're not talking about local government decisions at this time. We're talking about unemployment insurance.
Representative Carpenter, I will remind you of that for the last time. Continue.
Madam Speaker, how do you separate state unemployment benefits from that go out to people that live in Anchorage, that live in Juneau, that live in all over the state? How do you separate that from local government policies that keep businesses shut down? How do you separate that? Those local governments are choosing to keep their businesses closed in some cases, relying upon the state to have unemployment benefits.
Representative Carpenter, we are discussing an increase in unemployment benefits. That is the subject. Please confine your comments to the increase in unemployment benefits.
Madam Speaker, I am saying that an increase in unemployment benefits is subsidizing decisions at the local level. That local governments have an opportunity to get their businesses back to open and fully functioning, and then there wouldn't be a need for increasing unemployment benefits. The two are interrelated. We cannot have a discussion at the state level with a myopic view that it excludes decisions that are made at other government levels. I'm not going to make that decision, and when I speak on the floor, I'm not going to curtail my comments to not paint the reality that we're facing right now.
You're going to curtail your comments to making sure they are germane to the question, Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I believe they are germane.
Will the House please come back to order? Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think if we had to just let me finish my thoughts, we would have been done by now. Thank you.
Representative Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I did intend on supporting this legislation. It's unfortunate, in my opinion, that we passed an amendment that changes dates in this bill, because I do feel that we're approaching the end, hopefully, of the pandemic, and reopening is as normal. And I do feel that by September it would be a very sufficient time period to ease into life as normal, I guess, if you will. In relationship to unemployment benefits and the lack of labor available currently for workers, I do think that the two are very much related, and I think that the fact that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce came out in the last week or 10 days urging the federal government to scale back on UI benefits due to the lack of workers is pertinent to the conversation and something that all of us need to consider. We don't know what the federal government is going to do in September. They may extend UI benefits further, and that does impact small businesses. I know that we recently had one of our larger companies in Alaska that had to outsource a call center for workers because they could not find people in that $15 to $20 an hour range to work. And I would be very supportive of having a conversation about using this funding that we're discussing for UI benefits to be allocated towards more apprentice opportunities or other ways that we can help people with a hand up. And I don't want to say that it's a handout, but it does, I think, create a barrier for some people to go back to the workforce when they have over 100% of their wages being replaced with the benefits. One of the things that I'm most concerned about that has come up, and I'm hoping that we'll start having conversations about a path forward, is the lack of childcare positions available. And as a working mom myself, I couldn't do this if I didn't have daycare or preschool or some type of childcare opportunities for my children. And I really empathize with the parents, the single parents, the two-parent working households who have to take unemployment benefits because they may not be able to find a childcare spot to send their child to so that they can re-enter the workforce. I haven't 100% decided, and I'm going to listen to the remaining debate, but I do think that I agree with the member from Kenai that we have other options available, and this may not be the best path. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Certainly a lot of comments on the floor for me to try to wrap my brain around, and wasn't going to speak, but eventually had to when I heard all of the comments from the various members today. You know, one of the earlier speakers, the member from downtown Anchorage, talked about this, where the funding is coming from for these unemployment benefits and why the funding is sustainable. It comes from our unemployment benefit fund, which I believe I have that title wrong, not recalling it off the top of my head, but it is very healthy, and it was healthy 12 months ago, and it was healthy, and it continues to be healthy now as we've seen expanded unemployment benefits and discussed that now on the floor. One of the reasons it's so healthy is because Alaska is one of only 3 states in the nation, one of only 3 states that has employees pay into the unemployment insurance. So we've asked these mothers and fathers of children who are now out of work to pay into their insurance for when they would hit on hard times. So we have a responsibility to make sure that that money is repaid to them in a way that does support them when they do fall on that hard times. And that's what we're here today to discuss, is making sure that they've paid in and we get that money back to them, because it's called unemployment insurance. Because when you need it, it's there for you. And that's our responsibility here today. Additionally, there's been lots of discussions about this, whether it's on Facebook or social media or in the news, about what the labor how the labor force is acting. And of course, we are constantly trying to evaluate what it drives people to work or not to work. And so I try to not make up my own mind based on anecdotes or based on information that just floats through the internet to me. So I try to listen to the experts. And those experts are the economists out there. And who we have in the state looking at that is many people in our university system. And there's an article in the Anchorage Daily News from May 7th that says the research does not uphold, based on Nolan Clauda, an economist at the University of Alaska Center for Economic Development. Research does not back up that people are not returning because of the UI benefits. It says there's anecdotes on both sides of the issue in this article, so we can find whatever data we want. But we know that we owe these people the insurance that they've put in, and we haven't dealt with this formula in 40 years, as many people have stated. And earlier, when we were dealing with the amendments on this bill, a previous speaker said, well, let's pay out the permanent fund dividend. Madam Speaker, that formula is 40 years old, and we're trying to readdress it now, too. We have an opportunity to readdress this formula that we have not dealt with since 1981, pretty much the same time frame as the PFD, and we can deal with it today for a limited time and see what impacts it has. See if it stops people from going back to work, as hopefully the previous speaker said, we can see an end to this pandemic. But we're not there yet, Madam Speaker. We have not seen the economy recover, and we need to help those mothers and fathers who can't find childcare, who can't find work because they have to take care of 1, 2, 3 kids who might have underlying conditions that don't make it safe. This is a small increase for a specific group of people, and we've already seen hundreds of dollars ripped away from them by a stroke of the pen from the governor, and now it's our turn to try to uphold a little bit of work that we have to do to give the promise back for the insurance that these mothers and fathers have paid in out of their dime, of which we are only one of 3 states, keeps our fund sustainable. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Listening to the debate, it gets a little confusing at times. My understanding is that over 80% of the people on unemployment in the state of Alaska at the present time have no children. So there is no increase to unemployment for over 80% of the people that are drawing unemployment, is my understanding, unless somebody can set me straight on that. So I don't see where everybody thinks unemployment is going up. It doesn't sound like it to me unless I'm speaking wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Thompson. Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to clarify that this does not take away unemployment benefits. This does not take away any type of benefits that is out there that's currently in place. What this is not adding, not increasing. So this is not a vote that is going to take away unemployment benefits.
Thank you. Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate the comments, and I want to extend a grateful thank you for allowing me to speak. I know I passed earlier, but I wanted to come back and touch on a few things. When we heard this in Labor and Commerce, I was initially supportive of it. I wanted to see some amendments come, and those amendments were put in as the representative from Sand Lake described. And I wanted to see the end of COVID and us slowly moving off of where we are currently. As the representative from Nikiski has pointed out a few different times during his speech, we should be looking at other avenues to help Alaskans. Unemployment benefits right now, I understand. But there should be another way that we can do to help more Alaskans, not just what's currently put into this bill. I look right now and see on the federal side, President Biden has announced back in May a $300 monthly child tax credits up until December. And permission to read real quick, Madam Speaker?
Very briefly.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If the American Families Plan, the second major plan he's unveiled to overhaul the economy, this proposal will extend the monthly payments, the $300 monthly payments, to anyone meeting the criteria with a child for another 4 years until 2025. Now, with this news and with the amendments that were added, I will have to reluctantly vote no on this legislation, and hope in the future that we can make some substantial changes. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Tilton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's been a very robust conversation that we've been having, and I just wanted to add to the unemployment insurance and how that works through the employer and the employee. It is true that the employee does pay into unemployment insurance, but the employer pays in the greater portion of the unemployment insurance. As a matter of fact, we have the third highest average in the nation for the amount of tax covered per employee. And we also have the fifth highest average unemployment tax rate as a percentage of total wage. So I was not sitting in the Labor and Commerce meeting that said that the trust account is doing well, but we have the fund balance has declined by more than 40%. And if we are not getting employees back to work, and employers and employees are not paying into that system, I don't know how that balance can remain sustainable. So that's a concern that I have. And as I say, the greater portion of that amount is paid by the employer. Yes, employees do contribute, but I don't know the ratio of what it is, but I knew that it is a very large ratio in that balance, and I just wanted to bring that to the body's attention. Also, according to the Department of Labor Employment and Training Administration, Alaska has the highest taxable wage base, as well as greater program duration and dependency. Also, this was something that I just really found interesting, is that we are just one of 13 states that has a dependent provision. So I know that the conversation is about whether we increase that provision for dependents or not, and I believe that there are other ways that we can make sure that Alaskans are taken care of during this time in restoring our economy and bringing Alaska back to the greatness that it is and always should be. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Kaufman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, the message I'm receiving from Anchorage, and particularly my district, is that it's been time to get back to work, and that the cumulative wave of benefits and money, either from Washington or that we might put in through our systems here, are actually slowing down the rebirth of our economy. The coronavirus business model is an unsustainable one. It does not work in the long term because sooner or later you'll run out of money unless you just keep printing it, and that's its own problem. So I believe that it's time the people that have contacted me in my district and business owners in Anchorage are more than ready to get back to work, to get this behind us. And we need to start thinking in that way. I agree with the prior comments about incentivizing a return to work rather than incentivizing the concept that we're still in some sort of lockdown mode and we need to prevent people from returning to work or support them in not returning to work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Seeing no further debate, in wrap-up, Representative Spohnholz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This has been a very robust discussion, and many important points were made. And I want to agree with a few, and I want to clarify a few things. I think the last speaker said that it's time to get back to work, and he wants to incentivize getting back to work, and I could not agree more. We should be incentivizing getting back to work. In Montana, they are incentivizing workers to get back to work by using that additional federal money to give people a hiring bonus for going back to work, which I think is a fantastic idea. And I would commend the governor propose something like that. I think that's a fantastic idea. There's lots of other things that we could be doing to encourage people to get back to work. I totally support all of those. This measure does not preclude that. I want to clarify, there was a bunch of assumptions about what is in this bill and what is not, that I need to clarify what is not in the bill. The short title that is on the wall is actually on the board is actually incorrect. And if you read the bill itself, the long title is an act related to unemployment benefits and providing for an effective date. We eliminated all references to COVID-19 thanks to a member from Fairbanks who amended it in House Finance. We also, the original bill went all the way to March 31st, and our actuary with the Department of Labor said, absolutely, the fund could withstand that. And so there's not a problem there. Most of the comments and the concerns about this bill really related to that $300 per week of the, it's called, I want to make sure I use the words correctly, Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation, which the governor has ended effective June 12th. At that point in time, the $300 per week goes away. That will no longer exist. That's not there. And at that point in time, we will go back to the lowest wage replacement value in the entire country. And if you are a member of the oil industry and you made over $100,000 a year, your wage replacement value now on June 13th will be less than 19% of what you earned, despite the fact that you have paid into this unemployment insurance fund for years. Now, some people thought that this bill proposes to make a permanent change using COVID-19 as a justification for making a permanent change. It absolutely does not do that. I wish it were doing that, honestly, Madam Speaker. I'll be candid. I think we need to reform our unemployment wage replacement system because, as I just mentioned, if you are a high wage worker and you are unemployed, your unemployment wage replacement value is 19%, and you can't make your own mortgage. which is really unacceptable. We need to fix that. We need to reform the system and make it work for everybody. This bill doesn't presume to make a long-term change. This is essentially a 9-month change. That's all that's in it, and it's only for people with children and waiving the 1-week waiting period. So there's just these two things that we're doing. Previously, a previous version of this bill also waived the work search requirement. That's not in this version. Thanks to the member from Sand Lake, we took this out. We did that in collaboration with her. We think people should be looking for work. I believe people should be looking for work. We want to get back to normal. We want life to get normal. We want people to work. Alaskans want to work. They get meaning from work. We get purpose from work. I frankly love working, and I wouldn't not work even if I had money. Enough money not to do it, because work gives me purpose and meaning and focus in my life, and most Alaskans feel the same way. There's been a lot of folks who have said we should do something else to help people with the pandemic, and I just want to clarify, almost all of those things require using unrestricted general fund money, which is in short supply right now. Instead, this program proposes to use a program that uses payroll deductions that are paid for by employers and employees into it for decades. I've paid into unemployment now for about 35 years, and I have never collected unemployment. Most people never do in their lives, but it's an insurance benefit so that it's there when we need it, but it's just for this purpose. And we can't use these funds for any other purpose. Somebody suggested we should use the unemployment funds for something else. We cannot do that. That is statutorily not allowed. These unemployment insurance funds can only be used for unemployment. That is all. So we're not talking about making permanent changes. We are not talking about $300 per week. That is expired. It absolutely goes away June 30th. The governor has already made that possible. We're hearing from employers that they're already getting people applying. In fact, I just heard from a member from Fairbanks who had said that banks in Fairbanks had been having difficulty hiring tellers, and now they're not. All those positions are filled. People are going back to work, which is great news. So just to clarify, this bill doesn't make permanent changes. It doesn't have anything to do with the $300 per week federal wage replacement value. It makes a temporary change only for the 30% of people that are on unemployment insurance that have dependents. The member from Fairbanks was very close. He said 80%. It's 70% of people that are on unemployment don't have any dependents at all, and so wouldn't be eligible for this benefit at all. So for all of those reasons, I hope that we can just look at the facts. We can just look at what's actually in the bill. We can be really clear about what this bill does do and what it doesn't do. It is a temporary benefit that is that's not using UGF, and it's only through December 31st. It requires people to work. It doesn't have any linkage to COVID-19 at this point in time. We've already taken that out. And for all of those reasons, I hope that we can pass this bill today. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, are you ready for the question? Question is, shall committee substitute for House Bill 151 Finance pass the House? Members may proceed to vote. Will the clerk please lock the roll? Does any member wish to change his or her vote? Will the clerk please announce the vote?
22 yeas, 18 nays.
With 22 yeas and 18 nays, House Bill 151 has passed the House. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move and ask unanimous consent that the roll call vote on the passage of the bill. Actually, no. I move the effective date clause.
Are you ready for the question? Shall the effective date clause pass the House? Members may proceed to vote. Will the clerk please lock the roll? Does any member wish to change his or her vote? Will the clerk please announce the vote?
27 yeas, 13 nays.
With 27 yeas and 13 nays, the effective date has passed the House, and the House will stand at recess until 2:30.